So the Chiefs have two big positions of need they still need to shore up in free agency as well as the draft, and one of these is possibly the most crucial of any position group on either side of the ball. Well, in this video, I'll give you several reasons why Brett Veach and company must get things figured out ASAP. We've also got to talk about a big underrated player to watch out for, a pending free agent signing with a rival, a Sneed trade update of sorts, and much freaking more. But first, how about those? First up, Hollywood Brown has already been spotted training with Patrick Mahomes in Texas, working with the magician Bobby Stroop as well. This is great to see. Bobby has been working with Mahomes since he was a kid and is a wizard at training athletes in unique ways that not only enhances their performance, but also helps prevent injuries. And with Hollywood not being able to finish his 2022 or 2023 seasons due to a foot fracture as well as a heel bruise, working with Stroop is only going to benefit the guy. And speaking of Hollywood, the details of his contract are out and the cap hit is a little higher than expected, coming in at $8.2 million. I was thinking closer to the $7 million mark, as it was initially reported to be a one-year, $7 million deal worth up to $11 million. But either way, this is a nice team-friendly deal for KC, while at the same time giving Marquise plenty of opportunities to earn more. The contract is filled with incentives based on his overall production by season's end. Some of these are classified as likely to be earned incentives, while some are classified as not likely to be earned. It's a bit complex on how they factor which incentive is which, using previous year's production to determine likely or not likely to be earned incentives, but basically, any incentive Hollywood reaches that is classified as not likely to be earned hits next year's salary cap rather than this year's. If you look at the details, he gets incentives for reaching 5 or more touchdowns. He got one for 5, 6, 7 plus, the amount of overall total snaps he plays, and the total receiving yards he reaches by season's end. So this will keep Hollywood beyond motivated to ball the heck out, which I think he would do either way, and I'm excited to see how it all unfolds this year. More on the wide receiver room later in this video, because I think it's a very important group that Brett Veach has to address this year, based on a few things, again, that we'll talk about later. But that leaves the Chiefs at around $7.9 million in cap space once you factor in Hollywood Brown's cap hits and Tershawn Wharton, which is not a whole lot of wiggle room for the team at the moment. But before we move on from Hollywood Brown, Jason and Travis Kelce weighed in briefly about his signing on their podcast today, and they used a very familiar looking tweet while they talked about it.
Kansas City goes Hollywood.
Got my dog.
The Chiefs have officially signed former Cardinals and Ravens wide receiver Marquise Hollywood Brown. Look at that pose.
I'm pumped about this one, man. A guy can absolutely fly. I think it's going to be a great addition to the locker room as well as on the field, man. I'm pumped to get in the building and get to work, baby.
Mama, I made it. Well, that was definitely unexpected, but pretty freaking cool. Now, something that is not so cool is seeing safety Mike Edwards, who is a free agent, traveling around and visiting with other teams. He recently had a visit with the Colts as well as the Buffalo Bills. Both are in need of secondary help, so it makes sense, and Mike Edwards would be a great addition, but selfishly, I'd love to see him return to Kansas City. The problem is, at the moment, the Chiefs safety room is looking pretty solid. A very underrated player to watch out for next year is one I think they are very high on, with that being their 4th round pick from last season, defensive back Chamarri Conner. KC actually wanted to draft him in the 3rd round, but opted for Wanya Morris and traded up for Conner in the 4th when he was, to the Chiefs' surprise, still available. A big factor in their draw to him was his versatility, and the Chiefs did indeed move him all over the place last year. Defensive backs coach Dave Merritt spoke very highly of Conner back in December, saying he's probably the only rookie he's ever had that has played 4 different positions in the secondary: free safety, strong safety, nickel, and dime. Quote, "As a matter of fact, I don't think I've had another guy that has done that." And that's why when you look at the safety room right now, I think Chamarri Conner will be used way more this upcoming season and could play the Mike Edwards role as safety number 3. Conner played 305 defensive snaps last year, with Mike Edwards playing closer to 600 after he filled in for Brian Cook, but I definitely expect Conner's snap count to go way up. And while I think Conner is the guy to watch next season in the secondary as an underrated riser, you also still have Justin Reed and Brian Cook, who are starters. I'm hoping Brian Cook is 100% good to go after messing his ankle up pretty badly last season, being placed on IR to never return. But on top of that, you have Nazeeh Johnson, who's coming back after he missed all of last season with a torn ACL that he hurt in training camp. Then they just signed back veteran safety Deion Bush within the last week or so as well. So maybe, just maybe, we've sadly seen the last of Super Bowl champion Mike Edwards after all. Well, right before I was about to export this video, I saw online the Buffalo Bills PR tweeted out they signed safety Mike Edwards to a 1-year contract. So Buffalo does indeed get a great one. Sucks to see him go, but it is what it is. I kind of shared why I thought he would potentially be moving on, and I wish Mike Edwards the best in his next chapter with the Buffalo Bills. And that brings us to something else we keep waiting for a solid update on in the secondary, and that is regarding the potential trade of cornerback L'Jarius Sneed. The Chiefs tagged him, but have given him permission to seek a trade, with nothing yet coming into fruition. Well, Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated mentioned Sneed in his article yesterday, saying the Chiefs had discussions with the Colts. Interesting, Adam Schefter said there were no discussions, Lions, and Minnesota Vikings regarding Sneed leading into free agency. Diana Rossini of The Athletic said the Colts and Titans were both close to getting a deal done with him, and the Titan situation was confirmed by Matt Verderame of Sports Illustrated. Nothing has materialized just yet because Sneed reportedly wants to become the highest paid cornerback in the league, and teams have struggled to come up with an offer that suffices in the eyes of Sneed and his representation. Verderame went on to say that the Chiefs and at least one team, I think it was the Titans, had agreed to a trade, but Sneed turned down an offer for 4 years, $80 million. The reason for that is most likely due to there not being enough guarantees in that offer, especially after the first 2 years. Sneed is 27 and looking to maximize his next contract, so no shame in that. It just makes this tough when teams not only have to give up premium draft capital for him, reportedly a second is what the Chiefs would want, but then also need to sign him to a deal as big as he's reportedly wanting, $22+ million per year. Albert Breer thinks the price for Sneed is probably still a second-round pick, but Carrington Harrison reported this week that as of March 18th, no team had even made a second-round offer. That leads me to believe if a Sneed trade does happen, it's most likely going to be for a third-round pick and maybe another later-round pick. Either way, there seems to be a standstill at this point in time, and we may have to wait a bit until closer to the draft to see if a trade does indeed happen. If not, KC is reportedly prepared to keep Sneed on the tag this season, and that's awesome if they can make it work, especially for the defense. It just makes money a wee bit tight while they still need to fill in needs at several other position groups. There's a need for their quarterback 2, the running back room, offensive tackle, defensive end, and maybe even another cheaper than Hollywood receiver. If Sneed does stay and no long-term deal is worked out, i.e. he plays on the tag and takes up $19.8 million in cap space, the Chiefs will likely need to extend or restructure a couple of players to free up some more money, and then Veach and company will aim to hit as many draft picks as humanly possible to help fill these needs up. They currently have 7 picks, and a Sneed trade could give them 8, maybe 9 picks, with the 2 most important positions to address early on in the draft being offensive tackle and wide receiver, and here's my reasons why for both of those. The offensive line depth is lacking. Nick Allegretti signed a 3-year deal with the Commanders. Then both Donovan Smith and Prince Tega Wanogho are free agents. Donovan Smith was the starting left tackle last year, and Prince was the next man up as the swing tackle early in the season before he was placed on IR. Lucas Niang is still around, but is on the last year of his deal, and Jawan Taylor has the right side locked up at the moment. They do have Wanye Morris, who, after Prince was put on IR, played left tackle when Donovan Smith was injured late in the season, and he will most likely be competing for a starting role on the left side, but you still need to bring in some competition into that room. One way to do that is by re-signing Donovan Smith to another 1-year deal before or after the draft. He makes sense because he knows the system and is one of the very few free agent offensive tackles still left on the market, left tackle specifically, that's not over the geriatric age of about 55. So maybe KC goes into the draft to see what happens, and someone like Donovan Smith is indeed added after, depending on how it goes, just like they did last offseason. Then, the wide receiver room is just as important, if not even more important to look at for a few reasons I'll get to here in a second. And that's why I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs drafted more than one receiver this year and added a vet before or after the draft and free agency as well. The crucial thing for me is they need to absolutely nail at least one of these wide receiver draft picks, which is something Veach has struggled to do since taking over as GM in 2018, as good as he's been in basically every other area. Just look at this. Since 2018, he's drafted Tremon Smith, who was a DB/returner, so he doesn't really even count, McCole Hardman in 2019, Cornell Powell in 2021, Sky Moore in 2022, and Rashee Rice in 2023. Well, as you can tell, only 2 names really pop on that list. Mecole Hardman, who was decent during his time here from a production standpoint, and the most recent pick, Rashee Rice, who was definitely a hit, by far the best pick of the Veach era. Hopefully that means they're getting better at evaluating receivers that fit with KC's scheme, and another solid one lands in KC this year after the draft. I mean, it is so crucial, in my opinion, this happens because several players on the roster have some pretty big cap hits in the next couple of years. Chris Jones, Patrick Mahomes, Jawan Taylor, Joe Thuney, Travis Kelce. So staying as young as possible in position groups of need is extremely important, especially when you combine that with the fact that the Chiefs don't have a lot of receivers locked up for more than a year or two. Mecole Hardman and Richie James are currently free agents and able to sign with any other team. Hollywood Brown just signed a 1-year deal. Kadarius Toney is on the final year of his rookie deal. I seriously doubt they pick up his 5th-year option, so this is probably his last year in KC. Justin Watson signed a 2-year deal with KC last offseason and is on the last year of his deal as well. Sky Moore does have 2 years left, but still is a question mark on how much of a contributing factor he's going to be, and that basically leaves Rashee Rice as the only receiver under contract for more than 2 seasons. Then Travis Kelce has basically been the team's wide receiver 1 since Tyreek Hill was traded. I know Kelce's a tight end, but I'm talking about from a production standpoint specifically. And he also turns 35 in October, with retirement only being 2 to 3 years away. So it's absolutely crucial the Chiefs nail these draft picks in the wide receiver room this year, like they did with Rice in 2023. And when I say I think they'll draft more than one, I'm talking about drafting one early and maybe a little bit later. But with all that being said, I'd love to get your thoughts on the wide receiver room and the uncertainty of its future based on basically just Rashee Rice being around for the long term. Do you agree with me that Veach has to nail at least one solid wide receiver in the draft? Could be an early guy as well as a later round guy, but one of those guys has to stick. Or are you not so worried about this for some reason I may be missing? Let me know either way in the comments down below. And until next time, let's freaking go. How about those?